Hey church, in Philippians for 5 minutes, we call it 5 in Philippi. Glad you're here. The following of Jesus Christ is not just this mindset. It's not about having the peace of God and thinking certain things, but it's also having the peace of God and living that out. And as Paul's going to say in the next verse, practicing, doing, live out what you say you believe. He's going to say at the end of verse 9 that we are to practice these things. What are these things? These things that are anchored in objective truth. They don't come from us, they come from outside of us. Paul's going to say in verse 9, what you have learned. You don't know it, and you need to learn it. The way that our thinking comes out, you need to learn. How are you learning during this time? Where are you pressing into what you don't know that you might learn how to carry out what you say you believe? And what you received, are you continually receiving the grace of God? Are you continually being people who receive that you might give? We are people who have nothing and yet receive. What you have heard, what are you hearing? What are you listening to? Are your ears open? And then what you have seen, what are you seeing? What are you watching? What's filling your eyes? So that not only do we think certain ways, but we practice. So let me read this verse. Paul says, what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, do these things or practice these things. Paul is using the model motif again. He's saying, just like he did in chapter 3, you need to imitate me. You need to follow me. The Christian discipleship model is that we are to follow others as they follow Christ. And that is what Paul is asking them to do. Discipleship is living out what we have learned, living out what we have received, living out what we have heard, living out what we have seen. And this isn't in the age of internet and during this quarantine, this isn't cramming as much knowledge in to your mind as you can, but we think a certain way as we talked about yesterday. And now we are thoughtful and creative. How do we live truth out? How is your learning being changed and challenged during this time? How are you continually receiving from the Word by the grace of God during this time? What are you hearing and what are you seeing? These are, Paul, it's personal. This is a personal discipleship model that Paul's laying out. We as a church have to continually find ways to personally interact with one another as we engage the Word of God together so that we might be learners, receivers, hearers, and seers, so that we might practice. And then it finishes up with, and the God of peace will be with you. It's the God of peace will be with you in your thinking, but also in your living out what you've learned, what you have received, what you have heard, and what you have seen. So church, during this time, this awkward, weird time, let's pursue the knowledge of Christ, learning Christ. Let's pursue receiving more from Him, gain, as Paul's talked about in Philippians. Let's hear and let's see. Let's discipline ourselves that we may act on that. How do we do that? Well, we have to be lovers of the church and involved in people's lives. We have to wherever we can learn, wherever we can read, good music. Listen to good music during this time. Read good articles. Grab a good book. Challenge people and one another with scriptures and ask good questions. Church, I love you. May our entire church unity be based on the fact that we are learners, we're receivers, we're hearers, and we're seers of the Word of God as it's lived out in one another's lives. Love you.